Uwe Boll was bound to pop up on this series at some point. He has been called Germany's answer to Ed Wood, and a lot of people reviewing bad films love to talk about Alone in the Dark and House of the Dead. Yet, neither of those films give me the same feeling I got from watching In the Name of the King.
Ho 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 ho! Delightfully devilish, Seymour.
Yes, everybody, welcome back to Delightfully Devilish, the show where we discuss films that all at once meet the criteria of being the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm your host, Jukebox Harry, and today we're going to be looking at the most expensive film to be directed by a filmmaker considered to be the absolute worst of his generation. In the Name of the King, A Dungeon Siege Tale is a 2007 fantasy adventure film with a pretty ridiculous name based on the Dungeon Siege series of video games. I've never actually played any of those games myself, but the basic premise of them is that you play as a farmer who goes on a journey to warn local villagers about an invading force and gets swept up in an adventure to stop them. The plot is very basic, and this film adapts that easily. Now, video game films are a market of endless schlock. The only objectively good video game film that I have ever seen is Sonic the Hedgehog, although I did used to enjoy Mortal Kombat. Now, Uwe Boll thrives upon making films based on video games, and the two that I mentioned, Alone in the Dark and House of the Dead, those are both considered to be some of the worst movies of all time. He's also made adaptations of Far Cry, Postal, and Blood Rain, all of which have been phenomenally critically panned. Now, I've seen Blood Rain, and I've seen House of the Dead, and those two are terrible. I've also seen Postal, and surprisingly, I honestly liked that one. And of Boll's other films that I've seen, Rampage was okay, as was Rampage Capital Punishment, but Rampage President Down was fucking terrible, as was Auschwitz and Assault on Wall Street. Uwe Boll was once a very active person in the filmmaking scene. He had made videos ranting about how much he hated Hollywood, and he actually got into boxing matches with some of his critics. But when it comes to actually making good films, that is not something that he's very good at doing. And In the Name of the King, A Dungeon Siege Tale is the first Uwe Boll film I have ever seen, and it definitely did not set the bar high, so that's going to be the one I'm talking about. There are 3 cuts of this film, mind you. There is the theatrical cut, which runs for about 2 hours, there is the initial cut the director made, which is about 3 hours long that no one has actually seen, and there's the director's cut, which runs for about 2.5 hours. That's the one I'm going to be talking about. In the Name of the King, A Dungeon Siege Tale starts with footage of Goodfellas star Ray Liotta making out with the underage bride from Deep Impact, Lily Sobieski. And the affair is intercut with shots of a very obviously artificial castle for some reason.
I knew you'd come.
He came already? What a dud.
Each time we meet like this, I feel weak, I feel drained.
Perhaps that is what love does to a woman.
Love does that to most people. It's fucking exhausting. The more they kiss, the more things start to set on fire, and I don't get what's going on, but it's not how one should open up a big budget fantasy film. Give us something epic, establish the universe, don't just have 2 randos making out. Then we cut to a farm where we meet the hero of the film, played by Jason Statham. It's an interesting twist to see him in a fantasy film for once. He's mostly a modern day action star and doesn't often go beyond that, but he has proven to give some genuinely solid performances from time to time. He was great in his 2 early collaborations with Guy Ritchie, Snatch and Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels. He was really funny in Spy, and he gave a very committed dramatic performance in Hummingbird, which was really a step up for him. So I'm willing to have some faith in him.
See? Things worthwhile don't come easy.
Phrasing.
And he even carries a boomerang as a weapon.
You missed.
So don't eat the crumbs.
I ate the crow. I thought it would taste like chicken, but I was wrong. I think I gotta go to a hospital.
All right.
Ron Perlman comes in, playing the character Norik and taking Harvey Weinstein for a walk.
Where's the courage in just surviving? Damn it, farmer, would it kill you to just talk for a little while? I mean, we're not animals. People actually do converse with one another.
No, I definitely don't trust people conversing in an Uwe Boll film.
You should come by more often.
Well, I figure Farmer saw enough of me when he was growing up.
York thinks father should quit farming and join the king's army.
Farmer, you're not seriously considering this, are you?
His name is actually Farmer. That's what his wife calls him too.
What kind of parent gives their kid a stupid cunt name like that?
Give me the chicken. Arr, 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 arr.
Who agreed to film that?
All that you want. What every woman wants. A little passion.
If you want any kind of passion, you are in the wrong film, darling.
Until you're a man, being my son's your job. No one does that better than you.
Sweet Jesus God, I would hope so.
Doesn't he have a name?
Your father believes that people become what they do.
So by that rationale, I anticipate that your names are Annoying Child and Female Plot Device. A lot of moments in this film transition with shots of really poorly CGI'd buildings and landscapes, and it reminds me so much of another fantasy film, Dungeons and Dragons. As I discussed, that was another fantasy movie which cost a hefty sum but came out looking very cheap and had notably bad production values, especially in the visual effects department. And if this movie is reminding me of that movie, then that is a terrible sign. In this castle lives King Burt Reynolds and for some reason Matthew Lillard, aka Shaggy from the Scooby Squad. Jesus Christ, what a strange assortment of actors. You know, Ron Perlman is the only actor who actually feels like he's in his element with this movie so far. Everyone else was either in The Transporter, or Smokey and the Bandit, or Goodfellas, or Scooby Doo.
We're all misfits.
Krug. Savage armed Krug. They fight with swords. They fight like men. They killed off our entire scouting party. Had the general not ordered me to return with word, I should be dead as well.
Why don't you, actually show them fighting instead of just teasing us with this? John Rhys-Davies joins the cast as well, and he's the only other actor who actually feels right, especially considering that he played Gimli in the Lord of the Rings films, you know, actual good fantasy adventure movies. This film also uses a lot of tracking shots as transitions, and so frequently they highlight how empty the sets are. We see a lot of beautiful land, but often very little of it is actually occupied by any kind of production design. The market in this scene is an especially notable example of that. How empty does this look? It does not feel convincing to me in the slightest. Later, Farmer comes under attack from the Krug, a primitive race of animalistic creatures, and immediately Jason Statham's badass fighting skills take over. There is little hope for this film, but the casting of Jason Statham ensures that Farmer knows how to kick ass when he wants to, making it one of the few objectively good additions to the movie. It's just a shame that the camera work and editing doesn't do him any favors. It makes too many of the fight scenes jarring to look at. Also, during one of the more talkative sequences, we have it explained to us that Farmer learned to fight as an orphan as a means of defending himself, but I don't know that this explains his sword fighting skills. After saving himself, he goes to help protect Norik.
What took you so long?
Oh, sorry, Norik, I was just fighting off a small army of fucking beasts with my own bare hands and no support from anyone else. I'll try to speed that up for you next time. See, this was a movie filmed by someone who has no duty filming action scenes. It turns out it was the same director of photography behind most of Uwe Boll's films. I don't know why Boll kept putting faith in him, but it definitely would not be the first example of Boll putting faith in the wrong places.
Where are you going?
Stonebridge. Solano and Zeph for that.
Coming with you.
You be stay for here.
My house is on fire.
You can't see that, can't you?
Well, I can see that your house was on fire in the last shot, but in the very next shot, it's up again. And this is obviously a green screen shot, so I don't get how such a blaring continuity error went so unnoticed.
Respect is earned. You are mistaken. Respect is my birthright!
No, it's not. Nobody is going to respect you for being in this film, Shaggy. You are the white version of Marlon Wayne's character Snails from Dungeons & Dragons. You know, more out of place than anyone else in the movie.
You look like a boy.
No, she does not. Does not.
Also, way to sell out your gender there, Shaggy.
Farmer didn't come.
No.
Well, maybe next time you should try putting a finger up his ass. I hear that helps. The Krug descends upon this fake village town, and it is so unconvincing that I feel more like I'm watching a big live-action roleplay game going on here. But one thing I never tire of in this movie is Jason Statham's overdramatic kicks. There are so many tracking shots in this scene, and they either just make it difficult to know what we should focus on watching, or they just highlight the artificiality of the sets by showing their insignificance in the world around them. And Farmer also just runs right into a horse for some reason.
Bad plan! You are bad planner!
Through the power of magic, the villainous Galleon watches Farmer through a Krug avatar.
Well done. A man with spirit.
Do you realize that he can't actually hear you? They even got a Legolas lookalike for this film, because of course they did.
Art, I don't want to alarm you, but there may be a
Savage armed Krug
in the house!
Let him go.
Already killed me once today.
Okay, so that was the voice that you chose to have come out of that Krug avatar? You know, not something
Beastly, deep, booming,
you know, dramatic of any kind, just that? Why? Farmer's son runs off, and rather than staying behind to ensure his foe is vanquished, Galleon's avatar chases after him. I know this is a classic part of the revenge narrative, but when you think about it, why didn't he just stay and join forces with the others to overpower Farmer? That is your enemy! Killing this child is not going to lead you to victory, it's just going to motivate Farmer to come back and kill you if you fail to kill him. Galleon eventually finds Farmer's son, and just as he prepares to execute the kid, the screen fades to black, and then just cuts to Farmer burying him. That is storytelling at its most laziest. This is the #1 dramatic thing that should motivate the main character, and you're not going to show it to us? You're just going to cut to images of the farmer conveying what looks like constipation when he's burying his child?
This is so wrong. This is so wrong. We have Krug attacking men. The laws of nature are failing us.
There is anything natural about this.
You got that right.
What do you know of a man they call Farmer?
One would imagine that he farms.
Yes, I should think so.
I cannot wait any longer. You must put your little plan into action.
God damn it, I never thought I'd live to see the day where Shaggy is literally doing Shakespeare. That is something else.
Our army could not anticipate a sudden uprising of the beasts.
Yeah, where did all those beasts come from? Like, we know Galleon is responsible, but did the filmmakers just forget to film a scene that shows us where they come from?
Megus's daughter dining alone. How sad.
All hail Sir Eats Alone. Remember when I told you we're not so different, you and I?
We're not so different, you and I.
See, I did say that. Very clever.
There is a lot of talking here, and little of this footage made it into the theatrical cut, and I can see why. It doesn't add anything meaningful. All you need to know is that several inhabitants from the local village have been taken prisoner, including Farmer's wife. And it was at this point in the film that I realized an alternative title for this movie could be The Farmer Wants a Wife, a dungeon siege tale.
My friend.
Oh, friend! Oh, new friend! Oh, friend! Please be my friend! Oh, friend! Oh, friend!
Fuck you lot. Seems to be madness all around us.
Not madness. Darkness.
The same fucking thing.
Farmer, Norik, and Legolas venture off to find Farmer's wife Solana, and things turn inexplicably campy as they come across a collapsed bridge and try to cross it like Tango and Cash. Farmer gets across with ease, but Norik and Legolas don't have the same luck. They both fall, and we see that part, but not the splash for some reason. I thought we were meant to take this film seriously, but this scene plays off just like a campy joke, and it's not a good one. Despite the stream being apparently shallow, they're perfectly fine, and Farmer comes to meet them
Down by the river!
Then the king comes to chastise Shaggy in the throne room. And if that wasn't already a strange enough encounter between two very different actors, just look at the throne room. The production team built the smallest possible set they could get away with and then filled the rest with very lackluster green screen effects. The team in charge of production design really goofed this movie, and I don't get how it cost $60 million, especially considering that most of the companies in charge of the CGI kept on outsourcing their work to visual effects teams that would work for less, and thus created very mediocre special effects, which are very visible in the final cut of the movie.
Why did the gods fail?
Because you suck.
Things are progressing according to plan.
I cannot wait any longer!
Everyone's performances in this film feel very flat and wooden, except for Matthew Lillard. He goes all out, and the result is often kinda hilarious.
You always appear suddenly from nowhere.
I don't. I appear so suddenly from somewhere.
What the hell does that mean?
I just lost my parents, I lost my nephew, I may have lost my sister.
Yeah, but you don't seem all that bothered by it.
My liege, again allow me to offer my deepest apologies for mistaking your orders.
Subtle. I will shed this youthful folly in this time of great battle, and I will prove myself a worthy heir. No, I don't think that's going to be happening.
You show a knack, my nephew.
He does have a name. You know, you don't have to keep on frantically reminding us that the two of you are related.
Drinking wine in the morning is not a good way to show reform.
Indeed.
Neither is wasting it and spilling it all over the floor, dickhead. While out in the forest, our boys get attacked by a series of tree branches in the style of Evil Dead, and this turns out to be the work of treetop lesbian Peter Pan, played by Kristanna Loken from Blood Rain and Terminator 3.
Oh no! It's coming back this way! That throwing stick stun of yours has boomeranged on us!
Parkour! Shaggy and Bandit fall victims to Galleon's poisoning.
I suppose I may have tampered with the king's food.
You've poisoned me! You've killed me!
Don't be so melodramatic.
Jesus, even Ray Liotta has given this guy better direction than Uwe Boll could. Galleon trades the antidote for Shaggy's allegiance. He could have easily not caught that and then died from the poisoning, and then you wouldn't have your mole inside the castle. You know, you should really think these things through, Galleon.
Let us hope you remember who has the real power here.
Well, according to all the memes, Shaggy actually has insane amounts of power.
The king has been poisoned.
Oh, and you could tell by, like, just leaning your head up against him, you know, could you actually hear the poison running through his veins there, Gimli? If you're watching the extended cut, we're an hour into the film at this point, and really not too much has happened. I have to say I prefer the theatrical cut, because there was a lot less pointless conversation, and the pacing was a lot better as a result.
Prepare to move to the north, where we shall meet our new allies.
Why has Commander Teresh not briefed us of this mission?
Anyone else cared to commit treason?
Is nobody at all, like, the slightest bit suspicious of that? Because we're supposed to think that he's the good guy.
Why do you hate outsiders?
Because she's white, but she's wearing dreadlocks, so she obviously doesn't hate appropriating their culture. She leads Farmer to find his wife, but then he gets easily knocked out like a bitch. So much for the badass we saw earlier.
Your life is coming to a close. but there is time enough.
Yeah, there's still more than an hour and a half of this film to sit through. That's an entire film's worth of length in itself. And look at this shot here. All these men standing in front of a very obviously CGI'd castle. It could not have been inspiring to actually film this.
Ride today in the name of your king.
Oh, he almost said the title.
I can read most men like reading scrolls of flesh, but you?
You really have a terrible voice.
Farmer gets hanged, but Jason Statham barely responds to the situation with any feeling of actual danger, and he miraculously manages to kill his enemy and set himself free. And again, look at how unconvincing this set is. They just shot this by a random Canadian lakeside and changed the color filter a little. It doesn't feel like anything convincing. Norik and Legolas get captured, and Solana finds out that her child has died. She's crying on Legolas' shoulder because she's lost her son, and he feels genuinely confused by the concept of human emotion. Wow. For the record, this is actor Will Sanderson, who never went much beyond Uwe Boll films. This is actually the biggest role of his career, and the last time he has acted to date, minus a small nameless role in a 2019 film that you've definitely never heard of.
Farmer will come.
Hey, phrasing!
Uwe Boll actually decided to make that medicine out of a mix of tea and ketchup just to get that disgusted reaction out of Jason Statham. That's the only way he's been able to get some kind of sincere emotion out of any of his cast members so far. Farmer is brought before the king.
What makes him so special?
He is your son.
What a twist.
I love the fact that neither of them have any emotional reaction to this scene whatsoever. It just goes to show how meaningless everything is.
Can you not see? I am busy.
Are you thirsty enough to drink such power?
Yes.
He looks pretty thirsty to me. Also, Uwe Boll once actually hired real-life prostitutes for a scene in Blood Rain, and I can't help but wonder if he actually did the same thing here as a means of saving production costs.
You are the king's son.
I have no father. No parents.
I'm my own boss! I created myself!
I have no business here.
See, you're right about that, Jason Statham. You have business being in way better movies than this piece of shit.
Are you telling me that that arrogant bastard is my son? Spent the last 30 years living over a Stonebridge farm?
I can't help but wonder in this scene if Burt Reynolds is actually searching the set for people holding up cue cards for lines of dialogue that he's supposed to be saying.
You told me he was dead! You said they were all dead!
Dead seems to be the only word that Burt Reynolds actually tries to put any charisma into with this film.
We will spare no traitor!
So have you come to do your duty?
Duty. Diarrhea.
I've decided to fight.
I did not see that coming!
I don't understand a word this guy is saying. What goddamn language is that?
The Krug are a piss-poor part of this film. They're supposed to be the monstrous beast in this movie, and they're rarely on screen, they don't communicate, and they definitely do not feel like much of a threat. They look like someone crossbred the Ewoks with Man-Bear Pig.
They certainly look ferocious.
They definitely do not look ferocious. They're like a collaboration between the costume and makeup departments from Troll 2 and Return of the Jedi. The Krug try attacking, but get easily stopped by a storm of arrows, because contrary to what Shaggy says, they are not ferocious. So they send in the gopher from Caddyshack instead. We get another unimpressive fight scene. Sure, Farmer continues to kick ass, but the camera insists on doing more tracking shots, even if the action is being blocked by trees since the director of photography didn't see a problem with that. Every time the camera focuses on our heroes fighting, there is never any actual sword fighting. The characters pretty much always land the first hit and kill their enemies, so it is not impressive combat. Also, there is never even a single drop of blood. I am certain this is because the filmmakers wanted a PG-13 rating to appeal to a wider audience, which clearly did not work since the film was a phenomenal box office bomb. But it also probably made the film a lot cheaper, and we know that's what Uwe Boll is all about. To remind you of this, one of the next things we see is a shield which is so damned obviously just plastic. There's also a group of special soldiers who think they're cool because they can do front flips and dance their weapons around, but when it comes time for them to actually fight, they live down to the film standards. And the other characters just keep getting in the way when we're meant to be watching these guys. Okay, as bad as the rest of the fight is, I can see a certain crowd believing it. This, just no. Fucking no. How is anyone meant to take these guys seriously as antagonists when they do shit like this?
I don't know, but it's a bloody good question. Is this where we pay for our sins?
No, Norik. This is where we pay for our virtues.
So deep.
During this fight, Shaggy hits Uncle Bandit with an arrow, and whilst in captivity, Norik and Legolas decide to spark an uprising, which leads to Norik getting mortally wounded in the process.
Norik! Norik!
Hang on, are you actually going to try reacting this time?
What you always wanted. A courageous death. You're a brave old guy.
Well, you're definitely not trying very hard. Norik's death actually adds nothing to this film, so I can't help but wonder if Ron Perlman just got tired of filming this movie halfway through and asked Uwe Boll if he could be killed off. Very possible.
Wisdom is our hammer. Prudence will be our nail. When men build lives from honest toil.
Courage never fails.
Apparently Burt Reynolds had a lot of dialogue in this scene rewritten because he had never acted in a death scene before and wanted his first one to be something special.
Where did you hear that?
I told it to my son every night when he was a little boy. No one else. Things are going to be a lot harder for you from now on.
And this is what it arrived at.
I'm a simple farmer.
Yes.
That's all I know.
We literally just saw you hack and slash your way through that crowd. You definitely know more than just farming. And Shaggy has a duel with the Black Knight, and it looks like Matthew Lillard does his own stunts for this scene, so I'll definitely give him credit for that. This is probably one of the better choreographed scenes in the film, even if it doesn't transcend the film's low standards. He loses the fight, but with the king having just passed away and nobody knowing a farmer's roots,
I am your king! No, you are cursed to the throne!
Our beloved King Conrad passed away. Murdered by his nephew, who sought to take his place.
Farmer is put in charge and gives a speech which inspires his men but infuriates Galleon, who plans to use Solana as leverage.
Because you're carrying his son.
Do not expect this plot point to actually do anything in the film. They just toss it in here and then forget about it.
What about your parents?
Both dead.
You know, I lost my parents just like you. We'll take care of each other.
You're going to use emotional devastation and impending death as an excuse to try to get into a girl's pantaloons. You know, for someone with no personality whatsoever, Legolas, you are an asshole. And then the king is cremated in another tracking shot highlighting the distinct lack of production design.
Life has never been so exciting.
Really? Because I was more excited watching... the script here literally just says, insert name of almost any other film ever.
I'm beyond good and bad.
See, you are definitely not beyond bad, Ray Liotta.
If you can bleed, you can die.
I have to say, I will give this film credit for being a better film than Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. Another action scene starts happening in the rain, but who gives a shit? We're past the 2-hour mark now, and this thing just goes on forever. While this fight is distracting Galleon's army, Farmer and his new gang of misfits goes to hunt down their enemy.
I knew you'd come.
Phrasing. Shut up!
Gimli has a telekinetic CGI sword fight with Galleon, which must have sounded cool on paper, but in practice it's got weak CGI and a sheer lack of soul, predominantly because it's not a valid substitute for one which is actually choreographed and performed, and with the actors standing there showing no emotion whatsoever, it carries nothing but disbelief. And speaking of disbelief, we get this incredibly unconvincing shot of Farmer swinging his way over to Galleon's castle. Galleon kills Gimli in a thoroughly unconvincing death scene. And Gimli grants Deep Impact Girl the last of his power. I'm pretty sure those two shots were the exact same thing, just mirrored. That is a technique stolen right from Superman 4. As the film climaxes, we have 3 action scenes going on. An incomprehensible one outside, a shitty one in the prison, and a semi-decent one between Jason Statham and Ray Liotta, both of whom hold their own as they do their own stunts pretty well. And since their fight is the only thing going on in this scene, it's actually decent to look at.
All that for a drop of blood.
I also noticed in this scene that while most of the characters in this film have semi-decent costumes, Ray Liotta has pretty much just been given a duster.
It's like a jacket, only it's longer, thicker, and far more badass. I look like Lorenzo Lamas, and women find it irresistible.
Well, that part's just simply not true.
A little knowledge is a dangerous thing!
Galleon traps Farmer in a literary prison, but Deep Impact Girl comes in to distract him while Solana stabs him in the back, and Farmer manages to land his final slash. That very visibly made no contact whatsoever with Galleon, but somehow managed to slit his throat? Even if you watch this scene in slow motion, you'll see that it is physically impossible, but Uwe Boll obviously doesn't care about that. Galleon's army falls, and Farmer embraces his missus.
Something I've always wanted to tell you.
Sincerity's overwhelming.
I think I'm gonna weep.
You know what? Enough.
I really love Jason Statham's one-note insincerity in this scene. The only other time I've ever seen a movie which had an I love you that was this insincere was another Golden Raspberry Award winning film, Inchon.
Just remember one thing. I love you.
Then the film ends very abruptly. You know, for a film that tried to make an attempt to build up its characters so much, we get nothing after this scene, even in the extended edition, which has an additional 30 minutes solely to do that. You know, we don't see Farmer dealing with the fact that he's now a king who just led an army to victory. We don't see Solana telling him that she's pregnant. We don't get anything else. Why does the film end just here? Did they forget to film anything else? Whatever. Is In the Name of the King a dungeon siege tale a bad film?
Indeed.
I cannot understand why, in good conscience, anyone would want to extend this movie. It has a 4% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, very deservedly. And the theatrical cut is shit, but the pacing is so much more brisk because there's so much less talking in it, and it's a much better experience, even if it's still not a good one. With the extended cut, we just have more boring, tedious dialogue filling everything up. You know, I know Uwe Boll wanted us to spend more time with the characters so that we could flesh them out, but he never gave this film characters to begin with, so he's just adding more turds onto this pile of giant shit. God, you know, it goes without saying that the fault in the Name of the King, a Dungeon Siege Tale really lies on the shoulders of Uwe Boll. This movie was nominated for 5 Golden Raspberry Awards, and the only one it won was for Worst Director. The thing about Uwe Boll is that he's good at passing himself off as a filmmaker. He has ambition with this film, which I respect. He wanted to create his own version of Lord of the Rings. He was able to get $60 million in funding together, he got a cast and crew together, and even actually a lot of reputably talented actors. And yet, it came crashing down, simply because when it boils down to it, Uwe Boll is not a film director. He cannot create sophisticated action scenes, he can't assemble a team capable of creating decent sets or effects even with a budget only $5 million less than $300. He doesn't know how to command good performances or tell a story or how to make things compelling in the first place. Even if you look at Rampage, which is considered to be his best film, there is no markings of a talented filmmaker there. There is just a character who is very angry at the world going out and taking his frustration around while some guy with a camera goes around and filming it. Yes, there's a certain degree of relatability and anger in the movie, but it is not the sign of someone who is a capable filmmaker. As a matter of fact, Uwe Boll did not find objective career success until he opened up a German Bauhaus restaurant in Canada, which is actually considered to be one of the greatest restaurants in Vancouver, and that is impressive. Uwe Boll really does try with this film, but he's completely out of his element, because filmmaking is not in his element, and most of his cast are out of their element too. Aside from Ron Perlman and John Rhys Davies, none of the other central cast members really feel like they should be there in the first place. I mean, Goodfellas, Smokey and the Bandit, Scooby Doo, Terminator 3, The Transporter. This movie is a suicide squad of oddly assembled cast members, all of which are acting in a film that is not in their element whatsoever. There's also Lily Sobieski. She doesn't feel out of place, but she just isn't very good. The only 2 cast members I actually enjoyed in this film were Jason Statham and Matthew Lillard. Jason Statham plays the same one-dimensional badass he plays in most films, except that he's in a fantasy film this time, and he's also working with a director who demands literally nothing from him. It's easily one of his lesser performances, but he's also true to Statham form, and as a pretty diehard fan of him, I can give him a pass on this. Sometimes when he says lines like "I love you" with a complete absence of conviction, he's actually kind of funny. And considering that he does actually bring his talented action hero prowess to the movie, he is a pretty essential asset. And then there's Matthew Lillard. The fact that someone saw fit to cast Shaggy from the live-action Scooby Doo movies in an attempted serious fantasy adventure is beyond ridiculous, but his phenomenally hammy performance actually adds some degree of comic relief to the film, even if it's unintentional. It definitely cannot be what Boll intended, but nothing about this film seems to achieve what he wanted. It's interesting to think that Boll chose the Dungeon Siege video games as the source material for this movie. I had never heard of this video game before seeing the movie, and I think that's going to be the case with a lot of people. And no one was asking for a Dungeon Siege game. It seems like Boll just wanted to make his own version of Lord of the Rings and expected that tacking the Dungeon Siege name onto it might attract more of an audience. The film bombed, so that didn't work, and a director who has proven to have no business making action horror films definitely has no business making fantasy movies. A lot of critics have pointed out that this film is basically just a mockbuster of Lord of the Rings, which is ironic considering that about 80% of the film's screenplay was frantically rewritten in an attempt to differentiate this film from that franchise. It clearly didn't work for most people. From my perspective, it feels like Uwe Boll tried making a Lord of the Rings film, but ended up just making his own version of Dungeons and Dragons. Both films have bad production designs, terrible special effects, and a lot of miscast actors, but at least Dungeons and Dragons had a campy tone which made it somewhat funny on an ironic level. It also had a shorter running time. In the Name of the King is bloated, long, and so self-indulgent in its attempts to be serious that it's pretty unforgivable. And the entire story is just move to one location, Fight. Someone joins the team. Move to another location. Repeat. If the action scenes had any impact whatsoever, this would be slightly more acceptable, but they're just not. Especially because the choreography rarely feels like it's destined for a fantasy movie, and also because of the fact that the cinematography and editing are just so poor. In analyzing this film, I left out a large chunk of the subplots and character moments in the film because they don't really add anything good to the story and aren't even bad enough to be funny. They're just bland, and the production values are just so weak, which really goes over my head when you consider the size of the film's budget. None of Uwe Boll's big films have ever made money at the theatrical box office. Actually, this one made more money when it came out on DVD. If you're wondering how he actually managed to finance this movie, it's due to a loophole in the German tax laws, which say you can write off 100% of the money that you invest in the film and only have to start paying taxes on it when it turns a profit, which of course his movies never did. Now, that loophole was closed in 2005, so it changed the course of Uwe Boll's career as a filmmaker, but he definitely exploited it for all it's worth while he could. It's a good thing that has been changed. Honestly, the best thing about In the Name of the King, A Dungeon Siege Tale, is the fact that Kevin Smith and Juliette Lewis visited the set of this movie because they were filming the movie Catch and Release on an adjoining film set. And Burt Reynolds says they stole 2 boxes of Krispy Kreme donuts from the set. That's fucking hilarious. On a lesser note, this film is the first in a trilogy. Uwe Boll made 2 more. I have seen the second one, In the Name of the King, Two Worlds. I can't remember almost anything about it, except for the fact that I watched it simply because Dolph Lundgren was in it. It wasn't as bad as this movie, it was a lot more forgettable. In the Name of the King, A Dungeon Siege Tale gets 1 misguided fantasy film out of 10. It is an ambitious misfire of poorly captured action scenes, weak production values, and strangely assembled cast members who are all acting out of their element. And if you're watching the extended edition on home media, then pacing is a major issue as well. And that does it for today's episode of Delightfully Devilish, you guys. If you want to see more episodes of this show, please hit that subscribe button. If there are any movies you want to see me discuss on this show, please leave them in the comment section below. Otherwise, until next time, I have been your host, Jukebox Harry. Peace.